Lisa. You want to just check your sound real quick?
Hi, how are you?
Awesome. Hi. So we'll be starting in like 1 minute or actually in a second. Let me just get everything ready. Awesome. Turn off the music. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We'll be starting in 1 minute. I'm just getting all the ducks in a row. Okay. Hey, hello, everyone. So glad you are all here. So lovely seeing all the beautiful faces on the live Zoom audience. And thank you for everyone watching this live stream via LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. As a reminder, we want to interact with everyone, even if you're on live stream. So feel free to ask questions in the comments on whatever platform that you might be on. And we'll be moderating those pages as well. Remember that we want you in the conversation. So please add to the comments wherever you might be watching this from. And if you don't mind, in the comment or chat, wherever you're at, either in the Zoom audience or if you're watching this on live stream, please let us introduce yourself, your name, and what city you're coming from. And if you want to connect with the broader community, you can also add your LinkedIn profile so we can kind of grow our community on LinkedIn. Our goal with Community of Seven and our microlearnings is to help our listeners elevate their mindset and skill set by bringing leading authors, coaches, executives, founders, and subject matter experts. Our goal is to really democratize leadership development for all. That's why we make all of these microlearnings open and free to the public. And if you haven't done so, go on to YouTube and subscribe to our Community of Seven YouTube channel, where you can watch all of the past episodes. And for those who are new to the live Zoom audience, please turn on your videos because we want you in the conversation. I know as a speaker, it helps me seeing your beautiful faces and your expressions. So before we begin, in the chat right now, if you're either in the Zoom audience or watching this via live stream, I want you to answer this question. Don't press send till I tell you, but what is in your own definition, what is your definition of gravitas? What is your personal definition of gravitas? So add that in the comments right now. I'm going to give you a second to type that in. And then I'm going to count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Press send. So confidence, clarity, strength. I love that. Keep them rolling in. And I'd love to kind of see what you all have. What is your definition of gravitas? And let me look at the LinkedIn as well. Gravitas is confidence. Gravitas is leadership. It's executive presence. Let me check on another platform. Okay, and I see strength. And I see several confidence. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming out today. Today's microlearning is really about how to develop gravitas, confidence, and how to boost your executive presence with Lisa Sun. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I have such mixed emotions and feelings about gravitas. And the word that is often coupled with it, which is executive presence. I posted this recently on LinkedIn, but once during a performance review, I was told that I wasn't ready for promotion because I didn't have executive presence. I didn't have gravitas. And despite the fact that by every measure, I outperformed my peers in my division, I had stellar reviews from my clients and partners. In fact, I had brought millions to this company before I left. Yet other people were promoted before me. People who didn't perform by empirical data to what I did. Results, revenue, 360 reviews, client reviews, etc. Looking back, I wish I had asked this question. I wish I had asked, who gets to define gravitas? Who gets to define what a leader looks like? Once again, I wrote this recently, but I've come to realize that you could be made out of pure gold, and some people will never be able to see your value. At some point, I stopped waiting for someone to choose me, to tell me that I was ready for leadership, that I had gravitas or executive presence. And I became a leader, not by twisting myself into someone else's definition of executive presence or gravitas, but my daily actions, by becoming a leader through what I did daily. However, I also recognize that the term gravitas has been used and sometimes weaponized to determine who gets to be in powers of position. I've also, positions of power, executive leadership, etc. I've also come to recognize that gravitas in itself is not a bad thing. I've come to realize that gravitas is not just about how you look or carry yourself. It's also about confidence. That's why when I read Lisa Sun's book, I was really open to revisiting gravitas. There was this one quote in the book that really got me from Lisa, and it's this: real confidence is not the outward expression of an inner belief, and that belief is translated into action. So I'm squarely Gen X, and today's corporate environment is much different than the one I entered, my generation. In today's environment, people want to come in authentically as they are. I think about the whole tech industry revolution and how it turned things upside down for everyone. You have C-suite executives like Mark Zuckerberg wearing hoodies and jeans every day. With that said, there is a double standard being a woman. And in my humble opinion, there is a higher bar set if you are a woman of color. I think we do a disservice to young people coming into corporate America when we tell them to come as they authentically are, because we can't. I think of my friend, Carl, who was a Black executive vice president of a major agency, and he went to visit a client. He was checking into security. He was dressed in a suit, and he was told to check in the back with delivery because the person thought this VP of a major agency was a food delivery person. I want to share some eye-opening stats from Lisa's book, Gravitas. Statistics show that executives with strong gravitas are 45% more likely to be promoted to higher leadership roles. A survey of Fortune 500 companies revealed that 78% of CEOs consider gravitas as a critical factor for executive presence and executive success. In a recent study, 65% of senior managers attributed their career advancement to developing a sense of gravitas. Once again, there is a higher standard required for some of us. And also the rules for someone entering corporate America is much different than those who aspire to be in the C-suite. I know when I started going to board meetings and had a C-suite role, the expectations were just different for me. Many of the advice I see on LinkedIn are folks who have never had to deal with the reality of being in the C-suite or being a woman or a woman of color in the C-suite. It's a completely different game. I can't just wear my hoodie to work. So once again, I'm so excited to have Lisa today. Let me spotlight her real quick. So Lisa Sun is the founder and CEO of Project Gravitas. Project Gravitas is a confidence company with patented innovations in women's apparel and styling solutions that empower every woman to have a confident sense of self. It was launched in 2013 and featured in O Magazine, People, and the Today Show within weeks of the company launching. She is now a best-selling author of Gravitas, the 8 strengths that redefine confidence, own your power, and live with self-assurance. Lisan's origin story is so powerful, and I can so relate to her story. So it dates back to Sun's first professional performance review. And she was told, like me, that she lacked gravitas and that she should go buy a new dress, big jewelry, and great shoes. Realizing the transformative power that dressing can have, she secured the global patent on building shapewear that into dresses and launched Project Gravitas as a confidence company that offers innovative apparel and styling solutions designed to give every woman a confident sense of self. And prior to joining Project Gravitas, she spent 11 years at McKinsey & Company, where she advised leading luxury, fashion, and beauty products globally on a strategic and operational issues. Welcome, Lisa. So excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So first question I have for you, how has your personal journey and background, how has it kind of influenced your understanding and practice of Gravitas?
Well, I always say your life story is your leadership story. So my leadership story comes in 3 parts. The first is I'm the daughter of immigrants. My parents are from Kaohsiung, Taiwan, who came to the US in 1974. And my mom and dad are college educated, but my father worked on a loading dock and my mother worked on a hamburger truck. And they ended up owning a restaurant, Genghis Khan Mongolian barbecue, $4.95 at lunch, $12.95 at dinner, all you can eat. I worked there every summer. There were no child labor laws in 1987. I ran actually the cashier desk. So if you remember the old school carbon copy machines for credit cards, if I missed one number, my parents didn't get paid. So I had grip strength at a very early age. But I always say if you're the daughter of immigrants, you know what it takes to create something from nothing. Immigrants are visionaries. They believe in something before they can see it. So I started my life seeing what hustle and grit look like firsthand. I then spent 11 years at McKinsey & Company, the global management consulting firm, where I would say I learned client service, apprenticeship and mentorship, but fundamentally systemic bias was always going to be at work. It took me twice as long to get to partnership as my male colleagues. Typically you make it in 5 to 6 years. It took me 11. And when I joined the firm in September of 2000, less than 13% of the partnership globally were women, of which a small fraction were women of color. The third part of my story is over a decade ago, I started my own company, mostly because my mom convinced me to take my life savings and start a business. And really, this was a chance over the last 10 years to put my own fingerprint on what it truly means to have confidence. And I think for the hundreds of years, so much ink has been spilled about confidence. And we really are resetting the paradigm of what it means. And I think there is a fundamental shift that we're creating with the work we're doing, whether it's on the fashion side or with this book. But together, I think growing up, seeing what it takes to be an entrepreneur and an immigrant, being forged in the fire of corporate America. And then for the last 10 years, from boardrooms to dressing rooms, meeting people in the most vulnerable moment, I really think we have deep insight into what it takes to truly show up and live your life with power and self-assurance.
I love that. In your book, you kind of mentioned your whole that pivotal moment when you had that performance reviewed and was told that you didn't have gravitas. Can you, how have you integrated the concept of gravitas into your brand? Right? I mean, you named
Yeah.
it.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, our mission statement is we catalyze confidence, but I think, raise your hand or put your hand up on the virtual chat if you've been told to be more confident at some point in your life. I mean, all of us have been told at some point in our life to be more confident. And I think it's one of the most anxiety inducing, most ambiguous things you can tell a person. In fact, if you look up the word confident in the Oxford English Dictionary, it has nothing to do with bravado, swagger, performance, or executive presence. In fact, it's an understanding of, an appreciation of, and trust in your own abilities. So much of Western society, and I'll talk about how Asia and other parts of the world are different, but so much of Western society has reduced confidence to a corporate slogan and a behavior. Stand up, speak up, look a certain way, when in fact that is only 10% of the battle. 90% of the work around confidence is thoughts, values, and feelings we have about ourselves. The example I often give is, how many of you have been around a 5-year-old? You don't have to have kids, but if you've ever been around a 5-year-old, we are born fully self-confident. Ask any 5-year-old what they're the best at in the world, and they'll tell you right away, I'm the best at hugs, I'm the best at soccer, I'm the best at everything. Because at that age, we only see our potential and our strengths rather than what's missing or our weaknesses. We haven't experienced setback, disappointment, criticism. And in our adolescence, between the ages of 8 and 12, and this is chapter 2 of my book, there are 6 forces that act against us that form the basis of an inner critic. All of us have an inner critic. And because of systemic bias, that inner critic can be magnified or it can be allayed over time. And the way in which systems are shaped, most of us, to break out of these 6 forces, self-confidence is a choice and a mindset before it becomes a behavior. And I think that's really a big shift in how we talk about confidence in the corporate world, but also in our personal lives. So much of confidence is written about as a behavior, when fundamentally it's how much can you take a self-affirming inventory of your strengths and your value before anyone else does. And that's the big paradigm shift we're getting. And I know we're going to get deeper into it, but that is, I think, a real change, because I can tell you how to fake it, right? In my 20s and 30s and climbing the ladder in corporate America, I certainly could fake it, but it didn't take away from the fact that I was insecure, overachieving. I didn't like myself. I beat myself up. That wasn't real confidence. That was fundamentally me performing it. And even when you talk about Gen Zers, for me, they've been sold a lie. They've been sold a lie about girl boss and lean in culture. They've been told to pretend and fake it. Fundamentally, confidence is actually breaking out of these 6 forces and having the right mindset in order to then have the behaviors to take on the day.
I love your example of the 5-year-old because I think about my daughter who is 9 now, and I just remember her when she was younger, and literally it was like, I'm the best at this. She wanted to kind of be on American Got Talent on singing, and I'm like, you've never even had singing lessons, right? And I remember I had to stop myself and just think, as we get older, there's so many people telling us we can't do this, right? You have adults, you have the society, all this other stuff. And I really had to kind of hold myself back. And I was like, yeah, well, if you want to do that, do the research and let's see how we can get you on there. And it's a different paradigm shift because I think as we get older, we're told we can't, and we start listening to outside voices, right? How do you keep that I won't use the word confidence, but that belief in yourself, right?
Well, it's not, I don't know if we're told we can't. I think what ends up happening is we face setback or disappointment and we start to see flaws over our potential, right? Of the 6 forces that I write about in chapter 2, and I think those 6 forces become a really helpful way to decode insecurity, fear, your inner critic. One of them we call the deficit mindset, where you see your flaws over your potential. So when you look in the mirror, you look for your wrinkles or your beautiful eyes. Or one that does pop up in adulthood is called satisfaction conundrum. A lot of people say they have this. This is where you tie your happiness or your self-worth to an external marker of success. A great example is, I'll be happy when I lose 10 pounds. I'll be happy when I get that promotion. I'll be happy when I get that car. The problem is when we tie our self-worth to an external marker, if we don't get it, we beat ourselves up. If we do get it, we just chase the next one, right? I've lost 10 pounds. Oh, I think I could lose another 5. But when we divorce our own inventory of who we are and the value we bring from an external marker, we can still say, okay, I want to have these goals. I have ambitions. Whether or not they happen, it doesn't mean I'm a bad person, or it doesn't mean I think less of myself. And so these 6 forces that we write about, your daughter at 9, probably in the next 2 or 3 years, she's going to experience all of these 6 in some way. And I think the reason I wrote the book is gravitas is not a state of being. It's a total approach to living life with self-assurance. You cannot get rid of these six forces. So what is it that we do to give ourselves, to set ourselves up to handle these six forces and be courageous, compassionate, and more connected?
Do you feel comfortable kind of going quickly through the six?
Well, I want people to buy the book. I mean, it's like I've been media trained. No, I'll tell you the six. I'll tell you the because I adore you. But I've been media trained to an inch of my life, so I'm supposed to breadcrumb you into wanting to go and read chapter
Or give
two.
three. Give three.
But no, I'll give you the six. But promise me you'll all go buy. Oh, see, look, Lena just bought the book. Right, it's on sale on Amazon right now. But the six, which I think it's a very powerful tool because what you'll realize is you get to diagnose what you're going through, but you also get to ask the people you work with, ask your family members, like which of these six are you feeling? Because you can't solve the problem until you've diagnosed it. I always say you can't just jump straight to being confident. You have to know what is it that you're really facing. The six are the deficit mindset, which I've talked about. The second is the shrinking effect, where you shortchange yourself or you underestimate your own abilities. The greatest example is people who say sorry all day long without actually being sorry, right? Today is your day to stop saying sorry because you're not less than. You can say thank you. You can say great catch. There's so many other ways. When we say sorry when we didn't actually do anything wrong, it means we're shortchanging ourselves. Or why women will apply for a job if they're 100% qualified. Men will apply if they're 60% qualified because they're like, it's good enough. But shrinking effect is the second one. The third was the satisfaction conundrum, which I already covered. The fourth is superhero facade, where you pretend that everything in your life is perfect. And what I love is the most confident people in the world, they'll say, whenever you see me succeeding in one place, I'm definitely failing another. When you can talk about where you're failing, you invite people to be on the journey. They can have fingerprints over the answer with you. You're not in it alone. And so people who are deeply insecure, they post on Instagram to get the dopamine hit. Oh, my life is so perfect, when they're really hurting on the inside. The fifth is called setback spiral. It's where a negative event or criticism expounds to cover all parts of your life. So it's not just that this happened, but that must mean I'm a terrible friend, spouse, best friend, all these things. You start to expound it to cover everything else and you spiral. And the sixth is systemic bias. It's where there are asymmetrical structures of power at work, where the rules were not created by you or with you in mind. So when you quote, Lon, when you were talking earlier, Kelly Shue at Yale did a great study that came out last summer where she looked at 30,000 employee records. And what she found consistently to be true were women were scored the highest on performance and results, sounds like your experience, but the lowest on promotion potential. Men were scored the highest on promotability, but the lowest on actual performance and results. And when she double clicked on promotion potential, it was completely correlated to charisma, extroversion, and subjective metrics around energy and whatnot. And she said, well, this explains 40 to 70% of the gender pay gap correlated to promotion because charisma, how do you measure that? And really, I wrote this book so that we can all, I love that the Oxford English Dictionary word of the year is Riz, which is, shorthand for charisma. I want us to eliminate charisma as the primary metric by which we define confidence, because less than 20% of people in the we ran 1,000-person quantitative study, less than 20% of people in our survey actually have the qualities most correlated with charisma. 80% of us have other qualities of confidence. We all deserve to feel good about ourselves. We all deserve to be seen and feel valued. And so part of this paradigm shift is it's less about this external behavior and it's more about your mindset, your awareness, and then how that gets expressed.
I love that you added the whole extroversion because I think neurodiversity is so important. I myself am an introvert, and in the corporate world, confidence, executive presence is usually kind of closely correlated or defined as extroversion, right? Being the loudest in the room. And I also think of like the cultural difference too, right? I grew up in like you, Asian immigrant family where I was told, if you work hard, put your head down, you will succeed and you'll be promoted. And obviously that's not the case, as you kind of mentioned. It's not necessarily skill set and what you provide. It's those kind of other definitions, right? Whatever charisma is, extroversion, all this other stuff. Um,
Well, what
yes.
I'll say is, the reason I could have written a business book or a self-help book about confidence, but it took us 5 years to write this book. And it's because we did a huge quantitative and qualitative study. I'm an ex-McKinsey person, right? So we really did the homework. And there was a moment in 2013 when Janet Yellen was nominated to be the first woman head of the Federal Reserve. And if you go Google all the news articles at that time, there were all these articles about how she didn't have the gravitas to lead the Fed. And Ezra Klein at the Washington Post wrote an amazing op-ed that said it's because the pervasive view of gravitas does not stretch to include her. She's soft-spoken, she's collaborative, and by the way, she's the most qualified for this job. Why isn't that gravitas too? Why do we only use a certain set of masculine attributes to define who has it and who doesn't? She was confirmed with the narrowest margin in history, but that's why I said we need to go on a study. And what we found is there's 8 different types of confidence. There's 8 different forms of gravitas, not just one. And we call it a my confidence language. Most of the time, one of the things we say is we try to label people, and I say, you know what, you have 2 or 3. My mom took the quiz. You can take a quiz today, myconfidencelanguage.com. It's completely free. Have your family members take it. I got a lot of Thanksgiving dinner posts about our family figured out our superpowers, but my mom took the quiz. She has all 8. 2% of our data set has all 8. And if you look at these 8, you start to go, oh, you know what? We have undervalued some attributes in our society. And I saw someone just put in the chat something about Biden. I'm going to cover that in a moment because I've had a recent thought about that. But the 8 attributes are really, once you hear them, I do this exercise on stage where I ask people to talk about what they're the best at. And people can't do it because as adults, we're not conditioned to talk about what we're best at. And so with this quiz, you can figure out what you're the best at, but it's not a personality quiz. It's an inventory of your talents. So the 8 are leading. I set direction. I'm in charge. I inspire followership. Performing, it's what I'm doing for you right now. Extroversion, charisma. Those 2 are the most written about in all literature on confidence in Western society. They represent less than 20% of our data set. So the other 6, which actually cover more, are achieving. I get things done. I have a winner's mindset. I'm an athlete. Practice makes perfect. I set goals and I meet or exceed them. If things don't work out, I get up and try again. Knowing, I'm the smartest, most well-researched, most thoughtful, most prepared, most process-oriented person in the room. These 2 qualities, if you think about the 3 Black women in the movie Hidden Figures, how do 3 Black women have the gravitas to sit in the room in NASA and send a man into space? It's because their superpowers were achieving and knowing. They were not leading, they were not performing. In fact, if we all led and performed all day, nothing would get done. The next 2 are giving and believing. So I'm empathetic, I support others. Believing, if anyone's a Ted Lasso fan, if you're a Ted Lasso fan, believing is his route to confidence. In fact, in season 1, he says he's been underestimated his entire life because he did not fit the prototype of a commander coach. He said, I'm not here to win or lose. I'm here to help people become the best versions of themselves. So if believing is your superpower, you have positive intent. You see the best in others and every situation. You're optimistic. If things don't work out, they weren't meant to be. And then the last 2 qualities of confidence are creating. That's my number 1. A lot of immigrants have creating. You can will an idea into existence. You believe in things before you can see them. You can create something from nothing. You're incredibly creative. And then self-sustaining, which is the quality the fewest number of people have. I like myself. I don't need to impress you. I don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. And I know my value. It's the quality most needed to overcome criticism or ask for a favor or a raise, because you say, this is my market value. I'm willing to walk away. Somebody will pay it. I know myself that I will be able to find somebody who's willing to pay it if you won't. But together, these 8 qualities create a very different picture for how we define what is valued, what is measured, what is seen. My mom took the quiz and she was like, Lisa, when tsunami happened, men make speech and women clean up the beach. Finally, women get credit for cleaning up the beach, right? Because she was like achieving, knowing, like giving. Wow, these are qualities that are really not on the traditional HR scorecard. And I think the book that I wrote in part is number one, you yourself have to know what you bring to the table. That's actually a very important starting point. But then as you look in the systems in which we operate, do these systems need to evolve to see us, or do they see us and we're just not giving ourselves credit? We're not trusting in our own abilities. We're letting those six forces hold us back from getting credit or taking ownership of those qualities.
Such great points. So many questions I want to ask you. Let me just
Mhm.
start off with this really simple one. In what ways do you see Gravitas impacting progression and opportunities, especially when it comes to leadership roles?
Well, I think, the hard thing is when I was climbing the ladder, I mean, I think it definitely played to all my insecure and overachieving tendencies, right? The bar just kept moving and I just kept beating myself in the process. I think the first thing is when we coach and develop people, I think this is a very powerful tool for us to change the conversation. So it's not that I need you to be more confident. It's, hey, I need you to be more performing, or I need you to be more self-sustaining. We can actually give definition now to what we're saying. Confidence is often through the lens of the beholder's confidence language. So when you say someone to be more confident, you're like, okay, what I really mean is of these 8 qualities, I want to see more of this from you because I think that'll help you succeed. It also means, hey, even by the way, half of my team has an opposite confidence language to me. My top superpowers are creating, leading, and performing. Most entrepreneurs have three of those three, by the way. It's because I love ideas, I love being in charge, I love going out and selling something, but my profile doesn't get things done on time. So I'll give you an example. In March of 2020, I make women's workwear. The sales of our company were not zero, they were negative. We have a 30-day return policy. If you just bought a dress to go to work, you sent it back to us. And because creating is my number one superpower, I was like, okay, what are we going to do to keep the lights on? And I pivoted the entire business to making hospital gowns for local hospitals. And you can see the face masks that we made, 250,000 face masks for 72 days. But most of my team, they're not extroverted. Their superpowers are achieving, knowing, believing. They get things done. And so I celebrate them, even though we have different profiles of confidence. I always say, you know what? I am so grateful that I work with you all because I see your strengths. So we can change the development conversation in that we can say, here's this incredible portfolio of talents you bring to the table. This is what's driving results. At the same time, and this is chapter 6 of my book, when we want to get you to the next level, there's 2 or 3 ways we want to stretch you. I think we should add these other types of confidence to your portfolio. As people climb the ladder, they go from having 2 superpowers to 4 or more. And it changes how strong, things don't get easier, we get stronger. And I think the more that leaders and scorecards can focus on how do we get you to be stronger? How do we take you to that next level of development versus beating people up for not fitting a mold? I think we allow for more inclusive and more empowering workplaces.
So, talking about creating more inclusive environments, what advice would you give to individuals from diverse backgrounds on developing gravitas while maintaining their authenticity? And I think about especially Black women in textured hair. My daughter is mixed race; she has curly hair, and I remembered not too long ago. I mean, I think things are much different with the Crown Act and whatnot in recent years, where if you had your hair natural, you would be deemed unprofessional, which is bullshit, right? But how do we, toggle that line behind, like between having gravitas, but being who we are authentically?
Well, and I think, by the way, I think Jodi Ann Bury, if you ever get a chance to watch her TED Talk, I think her TED Talk's one of the best TED Talks. Jodi Ann Bury, about authenticity. I think the reality is we're not really asking people to be their full selves, right? Because corporate cultures really do have a set of values and a set of standards that have driven their success. I think at the same time, when we build connections that are not based on demography, but are based on values and based on strengths, it changes the equation. And I think that's why more diverse workplaces drive better outcomes. The example that I use is in the book is my favorite boss at McKinsey. He grew up very wealthy in the UK, went to Oxford, rode Oxford Blue, went to HBS. I grew up poor in a California desert as like the only Asian family in a 50-mile radius. And when we met, he didn't judge me on demography, right? He's like, I'm not going to ask you where you're from or what, I can look up all this stuff on LinkedIn. No, LinkedIn did not exist in 2000, but on like the HR system. But he asked me, tell me a childhood memory that you're proud of. And I talked about working in my parents' restaurant. And he said, okay, I know who you are now. You have real endurance, you have perseverance. Let's work together. And I think that when we start to ask those questions, when I'm in the dressing room with a woman, by the way, all six forces of insecurity show up when a woman comes into a dressing room. And what I do is I make her change her mindset. I said, you can't tell me that you hate your arms and you're going to lose 10 pounds. What I want to know is what's the moment you were most proud of in the last year? If your best friend was standing here, what would they tell me about you? Right? There's a way in which we can start to get to know others that goes beyond appearance, beyond behaviors. That authenticity is a two-way street. It requires those in positions of power to essentially have passionate curiosity that goes beyond what you can see and what the behaviors are. And for those of us who are looking to be seen, especially myself, who as a woman of color climbed a ladder, I think for me, it was around learning the tools around self advocacy and not beating myself up in the process. I think that is, if I could go back in the DeLorean, back to the future style, and give my 22-year-old self my own book, I do think you write the book you most need to read yourself. I would have really enjoyed those 11 years much more because I would have seen that, hey, the evaluation system has nothing to do with how much value I've created, how much impact I'm having. So I don't think I can solve the authenticity question. And Jodi Ann is actually coming out with a new book about authenticity. But what I will say is this is about building connection beyond demography. And it's about those in positions of power embodying passionate curiosity that's values based. And those of us who are looking to be seen to really understand self advocacy and also not beat ourselves up when the system is fundamentally unfair.
That's really good advice. Could you give specific strategies or behaviors that have helped you personally or have helped maybe the people that you interviewed in this book, how they cultivated gravitas?
Yeah,
Your book, you mentioned the 8 strengths that redefine confidence. Can you highlight some of the practical actions that you can
sure.
do,
Sure. By the way, I don't want to lose because someone put in the chat something around abide. I will say in the data set, one of the things that I love is I do think our society has become ageist. People over the age of 55 were actually the most powerful in the data set. Time, talent, treasure, and the most number of superpowers. And I think over time, I've had so many people take the quiz and be like, oh my gosh, I have 5 or 6 superpowers. Is there something wrong with it? I'm like, no, you're more powerful than you've given yourself credit for, or more powerful than how society sees you. So I do want to make sure I don't ignore the chat comment because I do think this book is designed so that anyone at any stage of life can see themselves fully. The three things that I often tell people is one, you got to know which of the six forces are holding you back. You have to learn to start talking to your inner critic. The thing is, our inner critics never go away for good, and you can't performatively wave them away. So much of the time, people say, oh, I believe in you. That's why I gave you that project. Why don't you just believe in yourself? They wave away their inner critic. If you can learn to have conversations with your inner critic, what's the worst case scenario? Which of these six forces? And you just say it out loud. Even if I have a shame buddy, right? I have someone in my life who is another entrepreneur, and I just say all the things to her because she won't judge me. She won't problem solve me. I just need whatever's in my head to say it out loud to someone and just have you hold that space for me. And she goes, done, go, shame buddy time. But one of the things I talk about is you've got to learn to have conversations with your inner critic because once you know what the worst case scenario is, then you can look at your superpowers and say, oh my gosh, what is the best case? What's the megaphone of my talents? When you know, and that's the second part of this, when you know what your superpowers are, it gives you gas in the tank to be a speedboat when everyone else is an aircraft carrier. How did I pivot my entire company to making hospital gowns and face masks for 72 days? It certainly wasn't because we focused on what we were missing. We focused on what we had and what our potential was. And so that strengths-based mindset is the second part of it. You've got to really know what you bring to the table, what your team brings to the table, what your family members bring to the table. Like I had all my family members take this quiz because it's really interesting. All of a sudden you start to see people differently. I think the third thing is, part of part of this is also just tiny little changes, something you can do today. I really believe we do need to eliminate unnecessary sorries, right? So, one of the things I tell people is just for one day, open up your phone in your notepad, put an X down every time you say sorry in a text message, a phone call, um, verbally, in an email, anytime. Just write it down, just count the number of times, and then subtract out the number of times you were actually sorry. If you spill coffee on someone on the subway, you should say, I'm sorry. If you really screwed up, you should say, and I did it one day, it was 38 times, net 38 unnecessary sorries. And I started to replace it with thank you, as opposed to so sorry I took up all your time. Thank you for your time. So sorry I was late. Thank you for waiting for me. I do appreciate your time. I did not intend to be late. I just started like, if I made a minor mistake, great catch. I really appreciate your feedback. It won't happen again. When you start to take out these little deficit mindset phrases, it does change your brain chemistry. And I start every day thinking about a moment in the past year that I was my most powerful because it does change your brain chemistry. The movie Inside Out is right. You can't remember what you had for lunch yesterday, but you certainly have core memories, and most of them are positive. So, why wouldn't you be able to hit another marker of success if you've done it in the past? So much of the time, we're focused on the summit. We don't turn around to look at how far we've come. So these are all some little things, but I did write a 200-page book all about this. So there is an entire bevy of insight in there.
Love that. Yeah. And I sent a link to everyone before this event too, with a link to purchase the book. I want to read some of the comments here too. Chris, absolutely a double standard for women.
I actually think it's a triple standard. I mean, I will say this is the book that in the book we say it's a triple standard. Women have to be competent, confident, and warm. And if you take out of any one of those, you get dinged. And this is, what's interesting is I think coming off the heels of like the Barbie monologue, Taylor Swift and Beyonce, right? Yeah, all of the times, and we have these moments like lean in, girl boss. What I think the timing of the book was really relevant in that we're all awakened to the fact of the abundance and potential of women, but now how do we actually change the scorecard for to incorporate that and be much more expansive? And then how do women learn how to self-advocate in a way that takes into account the environment and context we're living in? I will give you a little fun thing if you all want something to do at some point, which is look at the countries, and I hope I'm not speaking out of school. Look at the countries that have women presidents or women prime ministers. They tend to be cultures that do not value bravado, swagger, or arrogance. They tend to be countries that are more self-effacing, humble, and value hard work. So Finland, granted they're small countries, but like Finland, Iceland, Germany, if you actually take a wander on which countries have elected women officials at that highest level, they tend to be cultures that value achieving, giving, knowing, believing. So I just put that out there. I haven't done any data or research. This is me just thinking
Oh,
about the
that is so
elections.
true. That is so true.
I
Um,
mean, I'm not trying to get into politics.
no, but an astute observation. Some other quotes. I think you called it out before, mentioning Biden, right? How it's not just women. And I think this ties into the whole kind of ageism thing. Jacqueline says, in terms of hypocrisy with Janet Yellen, she was a B school professor. Is that Jack, my friend from Stanford? Hi, Jack. The people who said she didn't have gravitas never actually spent time with her. And you have a lot of people who just bought the book as well. And then it says that whole notion of ageism persists now, and that most of us participate in it without even realizing it. Jelly says, with the grand exception of Serbia. So I'm going to open it up to questions soon. If you have any questions, raise your hand or let me know in the comments. If you're in the live Zoom audience, you can ask a question. You can just ping me or let me know in the chat. I'm going to ask this question. Lisa, is it possible to have too much gravitas? And if so, what is the potential outside?
Yeah, well, I would say it's not too much gravitas. And in the book, we get at this. It is possible to have too much of a single superpower. So we actually talk about the shadow side of each one of these 8 strengths. So each one, when you get into chapter 4, you'll see we get through each of these 8 strengths and we say, here's why it's powerful, but here's the dark side of it. So, how do you course correct? Because too much of any one of these superpowers can be too much. I'll give you an example. If knowing is your superpower, so you're smart, you're well researched, you're thoughtful, you're process oriented. Wow, that is a real strength. That means you're capable of getting things done. But it also means that you might overthink things. You have analysis paralysis, or you might sometimes not think about the emotional intelligence side of the equation because you're so focused on the process and the data and the research. And so it's not about having, quote, too much gravitas. Any one of these 8 qualities can slide into something that can be an extreme. So if someone says too much gravitas, what they're often saying is like, oh, you have too much performing, right? There's no oxygen left in the room. So I always say it's not about you can never have too much gravitas. And for me, it's about gravitas if you define it as an approach to living life with self-assurance. You can never have too much of the way we talk about it. But any one of these 8 qualities can slide into something that can be a little bit too much.
I love that. Are there any other questions? And I'm
So
looking at
someone just asked about this.
wait,
Clifton
hold on
Strengths.
real quick.
Someone just asked a question about Clifton Strengths, or Strengths Finders is now called Clifton Strengths.
Yes.
So what I'll say is Myers-Briggs, DISC, Enneagram, Clifton Strengths, they are all based on Jungian psychology, which is archetypes. So all of the approaches, the work. So my research team was led by Sally Dancer, who's a former McKinsey partner who ran Consumer Insight. So they all use very similar methodologies. They're all complementary. In fact, you can do them all. The primary difference with ours is it's purely focused on self-esteem, right? And it is not a personality test. It doesn't tell you who you are. It tells you what drives your self-belief, and it can change and evolve over time. It's an inventory, so you can add to it. Not Pokemon, you don't need to collect them all. But in chapter 6, we take 30 situations in life, and in the data set, we correlated for each situation, which superpower do you need? And I call it a reference guide. So it can be like, oh, I need to go and give a presentation. It says I need these 2 superpowers. Wow, I have performing. Okay, why have I doubted myself? Okay, I'm going to go do this because I know I have it. Or a lot of people ask me how to start a business. And I say, you need 4 superpowers. Go look in the book. And if you don't have those 4, you either need to build them or hire for them. And so it's really, it's all the same research methodology. Everyone uses very similar tools to create their clusters around archetypes. I think it's how you apply and use them. So the application here is purely around self-esteem. It's an inventory, not a personality definer. And it also allows you to see other people's forms of confidence and what gives them self-belief. Did I answer your question?
I love that.
Okay.
She said, thank you. Thank you.
But it's complementary. Like you can do Myers-Briggs, you can do DISC, you can do Enneagram, you can do StrengthsFinder, and you can do this, right? They're all going to be, you're going to see similarities and overlaps in the answers anyways. But it's how you apply the work.
So I'm going to add Sharon Harris. So I met Sharon years ago when she was a vice president at Deloitte. She is worked at all of the top Fortune 50 brands and serial chief marketing officer. And when I think of Gravitas, if I think of executive presence, I think of her. Sharon, like anything questions you might have for Lisa or comments from this conversation?
Well, first of all, Lisa, I'm really looking forward to reading your book. I ordered it while we were on this call. I would love to know from you, how do people start to develop in certain areas? When you think about your strengths and your skills, a lot of them are attributed to your experience and they're cultivated over time. But how do people start to really add to that inventory and really develop new skills and stretch themselves?
Yeah, and so I do get into this in the book, so I'm excited to hear what you think of it. Thank you for ordering it. And there's 2 things. One is I think you need to know why you're developing it, and that's really why we wrote chapter 6. Is what I may not need performing if I'm never going to do these 6 things in my life, right? And that's my point. Is society has made people feel bad for not being extroverted. Okay, so if you're never going to go and sell someone on a plan or an idea, don't go to Dale Carnegie's class. Like you don't need to be a Toastmaster, right? Like there's things that you can walk away from and not beat yourself up about. But if there are things you really want, this gives you more direction of, hey, I need to go build that mindset and that skill set. So one is you need to know why you're building it. What is the purpose of it? Don't just build it because you think you need all 8. You really don't. I don't have all 8. I have 4.5 of them. And to be open with you, like me investing time in becoming knowing, it's just never going to happen. I never can build IKEA furniture because I'm a terrible person at reading instruction manuals. I don't have the patience, right? But I hire people who have it. And that's actually a primary thing of like certain skills. So one is know why you want it and know why you're getting it. And then secondly, get help, right? I think this is where you go. I think the mentor chooses you. You don't choose the mentor. Make yourself mentorable. Hey, there's one thing I'm really working on. What's one way I could do it better? Like when you invite people to have fingerprints on your journey, it sounds like you probably could give more advice on this than I could. But you start to let people own that journey with you and give you active coaching, and they see why you want something and they see why you want to develop it, and positive reinforcement happens. I also think in my case, there were certain ones that I wanted where I hired a coach, but I now knew what I was asking the coach to do. So many times we think we need a coach, but then we get the coach and we're fishing around the first couple sessions to figure out I think you've got to really direct the answer a bit more.
Love that.
But I do get into tips for each one of these superpowers. If there's one that you want, we do get into like, here's 4 ways to practice it. Here's other authors, frankly, that have written much longer books and much better books than mine on certain qualities of confidence.
I love that. Was that sharing any other follow-up, or was that?
No, that was super helpful. So thank you. Awesome. Looking forward to reading the book for sure.
Awesome. And Jack said he's going to be purchasing the book for his team as holiday gifts this year. So what are some of the common misconception about Gravitas that you think people needs to be addressed, especially those who are on this call or starting their careers?
Yeah, and I, this is a long journey to reframe the idea, but I think the first one is confidence is a mindset and a behavior before it becomes a behavior. Confidence is a choice and a mindset before it becomes a behavior, for adults at least. Okay. And I think when I talk about it being a choice, it is an active daily choice. It's not like you flip a switch and I'm confident for the rest of my life. One of the things I tell people is everyone on my team, you can see it here in the Zoom. Everyone on my team has a photo of themselves, either as a child or if they had a traumatic childhood, at a time when they felt their most powerful. So our head designer has a photo from November 2006 when he moved to New York City, and he's standing in front of the garment district sewing man. It's the moment he knew he had made it. But we all have these little reminders. I say Dumbo did not need the feather to fly. It reminded him that he could. So when I talk about self-confidence as a choice and a mindset, making that active daily choice is really important, and having that reminder, because it is not like you're confident today and for the rest of your life. I think that's why in Ted Lasso, that believe poster became such a talisman for the team throughout the course of the show, because it was a reminder that you have to make that choice. It's not like it's just going to happen. The second thing is it's not a state of being, it's an approach to taking adversity and setback and self-advocating. So that's a common misconception is, oh, that person's confident. Somebody in a book reading that I did or a book signing I did in DC raised their hand and said, Lisa, I'm going to call BS on you because I've read the book and I've known you since you were 23 years old. You've always been a very confident person. Like, I don't buy this origin story. And I said, I was faking it. I hate the phrase fake it to make it. I was faking it. Did I like myself? No. And I think confidence has been reduced to a corporate slogan. Like, I write this in the intro of the book, just be confident has become the imperative of our time, but it ignores structural and systemic barriers. It ignores the immense amount of work that self-love requires. This is why I love Lizzo. Like, I just think she's talking about how hard it is. And when I said that, the person goes, oh yeah, that makes sense. I could see how you could be faking it, right? And really not liking yourself in the entire process.
Awesome. There's a few people in the LinkedIn Live who asked for the link for the Gravitas quiz. And I just put it in the Zoom audience, and I'm going to put it as well.
Yeah, and it's super easy if you're just on your phone, myconfidencelanguage.com. It's you don't even have to go to the Gravitas website, myconfidencelanguage.com, or you can go to gravitasnewyork.com. If you click under the book, it'll say take the quiz.
Okay, so we have one more question, and we're going to wrap up soon. From Pantelis Sinalis on LinkedIn. Is humor counterproductive when trying to develop gravitas?
It really depends on cultural context. I feel like it's really contextual. I love humor. Well, it's what did Tina Fey? Funny people don't say they're funny. I think I'm kind of funny. So we usually categorize humor under of the 8 superpowers. We label it under performing, which is extroversion and charisma. So it's a great tool if performing is the superpower you want to embody for the environment and the context you're in. It also is one of the most dangerous tools because if the person on the receiving end of that humor um, does not share your sense of humor, they could be easily offended, or you could, step into a situation. So I don't know. I'm not sure I'd recommend it. It's really cultural context and the person on the receiving end of whatever you're saying.
Yeah, so I've also had Kathy kind of on, she's a stand-up comedian, come and speak to our event. And she said there's a double standard in the executive world for women. So being a man and funny in corporate is taken or perceived differently than a woman, even though they're both kind of superpowers. There sometimes is a double standard.
I was always very choiceful about it. So there was a moment about a decade into my time at McKinsey when just because of the pure, I look younger because I'm Asian, I can't actually do anything about it. And I write about this in the book. I was meeting with the CEO of a department store, a very famous department store. And there were 5 of us coming in from the McKinsey team, and I was the lead partner. And no discredit to him. There's nothing, I'm not calling him out, but he thought I was the assistant on the team and asked me for a cup of coffee. And I said to this person, "Oh my goodness, what a compliment." I said, "Actually, I'm the lead partner. I've been at McKinsey over a decade. Thank you so much. I have great Asian genetics. Thank you. I'm going to look 35 years old for the rest of my life." And he started laughing, but the laughing was clearly that I had called the unconscious bias out. I had made the unconscious bias conscious. And so in that moment, humor for me was a tactical way of asserting the power that I had in the room. And for the rest of the meeting, he definitely listened more intently when I spoke, right? Because right off the bat, I used humor. I didn't make him feel bad about it. I just said, "Oh my goodness, what a nice compliment. I'm going to call my mom tonight and tell her that you think I look like I'm an analyst on this team," right? These Asian genetics, they're going to serve me well for decades. But I have used humor when it is incredibly strategic or tactical. I don't use humor as a way to like build connection or, even the stories I told today, you might have chuckled a few times, but they were very carefully thought through.
Yeah. And so kind of wrapping up, what is the one piece of advice you would like the listeners who are kind of watching in the Zoom room or on live stream to take away from this call? What's the one piece of advice?
You're more powerful than you think. And if you can just take a moment and return to that 5-year-old version of yourself, truly, I do think it's not what advice you'd give your 9-year-old self, it's what would your 9-year-old self tell you. I truly believe my 9-year-old self was the most powerful. I thought I was going to be president of the United States, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I could still be one of those. I think you'd all try to vote for me, I hope. But I do think we are more powerful than we think. And we've just systems and forces have gotten in our way from seeing just how powerful we are. But you've got to see it first before anyone else does. You cannot receive a compliment until you've paid yourself one. You cannot give what you do not have. And I think that's my call to action for everyone, to take a self-affirming inventory of their strengths and talents today, because that is the basis for true gravitas.
I love that. So everyone, if you can turn on whoever is in the live Zoom audience, if you can on the top right hand side, put this in gallery mode. The one time I asked you to turn on your videos, unmute yourself, and real quick before we give her a round of applause, make sure you buy the book, and not only buy the book, make sure you go on Amazon, Goodread, etc., and also give feedback once you've read it, because that's how we give authors a hug. So buy the book and then review it, and then tell your friends, and like Jacqueline kind of mentioned it, buy it for your team. And the one way we show love is through the reviews for authors. So turn on your video, open, I think Lisa deserves a round of applause, everyone.
Thank you,
Lisa. That was so inspiring. Thank you so much. I have taken so much from this call. And I think everyone on this call live stream is going to buy your book. And make sure you review it
Thank
as
you.
well. That was so powerful. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
everyone for joining. We're going to upload this to YouTube. So go to our Community of Seven live video on YouTube, and you can watch all the past episodes. We'll be uploading this one probably in a week or so after we edit it. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Thanks, Lisa.